Hello everybody, J.A. Huss here with The Perfect Story. This course is about writing craft, where the other one, The Perfect Year, was about marketing. And in this one, we're going to cover all the basics of plotting, including beginnings, middles, and endings, plus things like point of view, characterization, dialogue, suspense, writing sex scenes, editing, and blurbs. Now we're going to do one of these for each video. So there's going to be 10 in total. And the first thing I want to tell you is that I have no writing degrees. I have no degree in writing, have never taken a creative writing class, and I actually was trained to be a scientist before I started writing. However, I have written more than 200 nonfiction science courses for kids, and I have more than 40 fiction books. So I think I have a bit of a handle on this process, at least as it pertains to my process. And if you're somebody who kind of writes the same way I do, I think you're going to get a lot out of this. If you're not somebody who, has a process like mine and you don't see yourself, as a big structure person, you might not get a lot out of this. So this is one of the reasons why I'm not charging for these courses, because I know that not every method is for every author, and I know there's probably only a few people who are going to really relate to this on a level that would be worth charging money for, and so I don't think it's fair to charge money when really all I'm doing is giving you my process, and that's it, because that's the only thing I'm an expert in. I think I told you that in The Perfect Year in the beginning. I'm not an expert in marketing. I'm only an expert in marketing J. Huss books. And you can try the things that I've done and see how they work for you. And the same thing goes for this craft course. You can try what I've done and see if it works for you, but there's no guarantee that it will. So keep that in mind as you're going through the course. And if you find yourself saying, no, I don't agree with that, that's fine. It's just, this is the process that works for me. Okay, one more disclaimer is that I am not a pantser, I am a plotter. And I don't mean that I outline every scene and know every scene before I start writing it, because I don't. And I'm going to explain that to you as we go through this first video for beginnings. But if you are a true pantser, where you just sit down and start writing, this course is not for you at all, and you can turn it off right now, because you're going to be very frustrated at the end, because I'm not going to say anything really that can help you if you're so dead set on being a pantser. And if you're new to the writing world, a pantser means the seat of your pants. They write by the seat of their pants, right? They just make it up as they go. And the opposite of that would be somebody who plots out ahead of time. And a lot of people call that outlining, but I don't outline. I'm just going to show you what I do, and it's very simple. And you can actually mix pantsing with plotting very, very easily if you want to. So if you're interested in changing your pantsing approach, then I would encourage you to keep listening. So, what is a beginning? I think we should start with what it's not. And what it's not is an info dump of everything that's happened to your character or in your world before you started chapter 1. Nobody wants to start a book that way. They want to be engaged from the very first page. So, make sure that when you start your book, that you start at an engaging point in the story where you don't have to do a lot of explaining. Because you can sprinkle little hints about backstory and world development throughout the story and make it much more interesting that way, and still get all the information you need into your story. So, do you remember Goldilocks and Three Bears? Everybody does. I think most people in the world probably know that if they speak English, because it's a very popular story. And we all know the story because our parents told it to us. And we loved it as children. And the reason we loved it is because it has great structure. It starts out with once upon a time, like most fairy tales. Once upon a time, there were 3 bears: Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear. And this is your proper introduction. We get 3 character introductions. It's short, sweet, to the point, but it's still very interesting. We learn that bears are living in a cabin or house in the woods. They made some porridge. It's too hot, so they decide as a family to go out and take a walk. Then we get a twist in the story because Goldilocks shows up at the cabin. And as a child, you're thinking, who's Goldilocks? She's a little girl. She's in the woods alone. And wait a minute. Wait, she's breaking into the house of the 3 bears? And that immediately grabs the kids' attention. So this is the end of the beginning of the Goldilocks story. It was, it's not a long story to begin with, but the end of the beginning is when Goldilocks goes inside the bear house and everything changes for Goldilocks and the bears, even though the bears aren't there. This is the first plot point, or the first twist as I call it, and it's the end of the beginning and sets up the entire plot. Okay, notice what we didn't get. We didn't get any explanation of Goldilocks. We don't know where her parents are. We don't know why she's in the woods alone. But we don't need to know any of that. This is very important, so listen carefully. The story of the 3 bears is one of the most popular fairy tales in the English language because it's set up perfectly. The 3 bears is the perfect story, and I'm going to use that as an example over and over as I go through these videos, at least for beginnings, middles, and endings, because it's set up so perfect. In story structure, readers don't know why they like a story, but the reason why is because of the structure of the story. They get all the elements set up in the perfect way, and at the end they find satisfaction. And you can break these rules anytime you want, but make sure you know what you're doing before you do that. So when you start writing your beginning, remember Goldilocks. Keep it on point. Don't add any backstory that you don't have to. Tell people just enough about the setting to put them there in the moment, in the here and now. Exceptions exist in everything, of course, but you can't break the rules until you know the rules. And the rules of story structure are very, very simple. There is a beginning. There is a twist in the story. There is a middle that consists of many twists. There is a crisis, which is another twist, and that brings up the ending. So it's a very simple structure. It's not hard to do at all. The hard thing is putting everything in the right place and setting it up in the right way. So let's go through the Goldilocks story. Once upon a time, in the beginning, Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear go for a walk. Then there is a twist because Goldilocks shows up and goes inside the house. That's the end of the beginning. In the middle, Goldilocks starts breaking things and helping herself to porridge. Then she falls asleep. That's the end of the middle and sets up the ending where the 3 bears come home, find their porridge all messed with, find things broken, and find a little girl in their house whom they promptly chase away. Notice, one thing is very important. The beginning of a book has a direct effect on the ending of a book, at least for a good book. And lots of people write shitty books that don't connect these 2 things, and when your reader gets to the end, they're kind of going, okay, did I waste my time here, or do I like that? I'm not sure. You don't want that reaction at the end of your book. So make the beginning of the book tie back to the ending of the book. Okay, kids like the story of the 3 bears and Goldilocks because she's being bad. And they kind of relate to her because she's a little kid and she's in the woods alone and she's hungry and tired and she finds food in a bed. And so they want her to be comfortable. But it's also about respecting other people's stuff. It has a purpose. It has a theme. Your story needs a purpose. And hint at that purpose in the first chapter with foreshadowing. If you don't know what foreshadowing is, it just means mentioning something earlier in the story and having it be relevant later in the story. And you can do this any way you want. You can have a flashback, you can plant a clue, you can mention a character that will be pivotal later, and all you're really trying to do is tie the first chapter to the last chapter, or it doesn't literally have to be the first chapter and the last chapter. You just want to tie the beginning to the end. And then that sets up reader satisfaction when they finish the book, which is something you want. So make something that happens in chapter 1 have an important role in the outcome of the book. So I'm going to use taking turns to help you see this a little more clearly. and plot it out for you, because I think Taking Turns was plotted very well. I think it's pretty much perfect in my mind. So, in the beginning, a girl named Rochelle is playing the game of taking turns with three men, Quinn, Brick, and Smith. And they share her. And she's been playing this game for 3 years, but one night Quinn goes up for his night with Rochelle, all happy and excited because he's realizing he's falling in love with her. And instead of Rochelle, he finds a girl named Marcella, and Rochelle's bad. And nobody knows why Rochelle has gone and Chella has shown up. The reader doesn't know, and none of the guys in the story know either. So that's the setup. The first plot point is all four players agree to start a new game. So this is the new girl Chella and the three men, Quinn, Smith, and Brick. And so they start the new game of taking turns, where all three of these guys share this one woman. And in the middle, there are many twists. And for taking turns, all the rules of the game are revealed slowly. They're dished out a little bit at a time with each of the characters. And Chella begins to develop a relationship with each of the men individually. Then there's a crisis. Chella quits the game and tells everyone why Rochelle left. And then the final resolution, or the ending of the book, is Rochelle makes contact and Chella deals with the reason she played the game in the first place. Which brings us right back to the beginning. The beginning has a direct effect on the ending of the book. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't start a book unless I know how it ends, because I only write one draft. I do edit my draft once before I send it to the editor, and then I do edit it again, making tweaks and accepting changes when it comes back from the editor, but that's all I do. So I am not interested in writing a book and then rewriting it 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever times. I only write the book once, and then I make very small changes, send it to the editor, make more very small changes, and publish it. So I have to know how everything is set up before I start writing. Otherwise, I'm wasting my time. And the reason why I can make a one draft book work so well is because I know, besides all the plot points, I know the theme of the book before I start. And the theme is some kind of take-home message. So in every one of my books, there is some kind of theme revolving around family or friendship or loyalty. It's mostly about how friendship turns into family, whether that be romantic or just friendship, not romantic, and how people in these teams that I set up with these characters are very loyal to each other. But underneath that overall theme that goes through every single book that I have is an underlying theme. And the underlying theme in Taking Turns is shame. In 3-2-1, it's secrets destroy you. In Anarchy series, it's good versus evil. And in the Misters, it's all about innocence, both losing one's innocence and being found innocent or guilty in a court of law. So this is how I start setting up the book. And if you know your theme going in, you can build your characters around it and make them very three-dimensional. So, for instance, Chella agrees to be part of a sex game with three men, but that's not what causes her shame. Her shame comes from wanting this dark side of sex more than she thinks she should. And I use this throughout the whole book because I knew that was her theme going in. So theme is really the difference between a good book and a great book. So if you're a pantser, this is why I told you I can't help you. Because if you're not willing to think these things through before you sit down and just start writing, like, my method is just not going to work for you. So, I mean, that's all I can say. The pantsers claim they don't plan a story, they just write what comes to them. Well, I write what comes to me too when I'm in the scene. But before I get to the scene, I have to know what this fucking scene is about, right? Like, I'm not out to waste my time. If I'm going to sit down and write, I'm going to knock out several thousand words, and I'm never going to delete those words. I don't ever delete, like, whole chapters or even paragraphs. Very, very rarely do I ever go back and delete things because I wasted my time. If those words aren't going to stay on my page, then I wasted my time. So I don't want to waste my time, and that's why I want to know everything before I start. And keep in mind, this is just me. So this is my process. I come up with a concept, a premise, and my characters. Then I come up with a theme. I decide how the book ends, which is the climax. I figure out the first twist, which is the 25% plot point. I figure out the last twist, which is the crisis. And then I plot my way from first twist to crisis, and that's called the middle. After I've done all that, and all of this stuff could fit on one piece of paper, okay? It's not like a notebook full of shit. But once I do that, then I can decide how I want to start the book. I always come up with the beginning last, in most cases, or pretty close to the end, and then once I get the beginning, and then I start writing. So, I'm going to take you through my process of taking turns and tell you how I came up with it. So I came up with the concept, premise, and characters for taking turns. And the concept is just the general overall theme. And my general overall theme was, what if there's an underground sex club in Denver run by 3 different men, and they're playing a game called Taking Turns with one woman at a time. And the premise is like building the story around that a little more closely. And so my premise was Marcella Walcott takes the place of her friend in the game of Taking Turns and comes to terms with her own sexuality. So that was the concept and the premise and the characters. So I have 5 characters, really. I have Marcella and Rochelle. Rochelle is not present in the book at all. And then I have the 3 men who are playing the game with Marcella. Once I do that, I come up with a theme. And I knew that the theme going in was that Marcella thinks the dark side of sex is shameful, but she secretly likes it a lot. So I knew that was going to affect every conversation that she had with these men. It was going to affect how I set up the story, how she reacted through all these interactions with these men. And of course, this is going to be the main thing that drives home the crisis and the ending and the climax of the book. So the theme was shame. And then I come up with the climax. And the climax is, this is after the crisis. So it's the very end of the book. Marcella falls in love with one of the 3 men in the game. So I knew that. And then I come up with the first twist. And I knew that it's going to take a little while to build from the beginning hook to the 25% plot point. I knew that this book was going to be at least 100,000 words and ended up at about 105,000 words. So I knew I had to get to 25,000 words without them making a decision to play the game yet, because that is the transition from old world to new world. And so I had to fill in the beginning with a whole bunch of stuff to keep it interesting to get to this first plot point, which was when all 4 of these people decide they're going to play the game together. And what I did was just, I had very long chapters in this book. Each of them started out at 3,000 words, and there's 4 points of view. So it didn't take very long to get to 25% because I was introducing each character very, very slowly. The last twist in the story is, of course, has to do with the theme and the beginning of the book. So Marcella has to confront her shame in a public way, and that is the crisis. And then the middle is the hardest part for most people. But if you know that at 25%, the end of the beginning, Marcella is deciding to play the game with these 3 men, and at the crisis, she's going to have to deal with the reason why she's there, then you know what to put in that middle. And my middle was she's developing a very personal relationship with each of these men, and they're very, very different. And that keeps the reader engaged because I knew each reason why each of these 4 people are playing this game are totally different. And so I knew it was going to be a 3-book series, and I knew this book was going to be about Marcella, Urchella, and Smith, one of the guys. And so I spent most of the time building Smith and Chella's relationship, but at the same time I wanted to keep people interested in reading the next 2 books in the series about Quinn and Brick. So I took time in the middle to develop both Quinn and Brick's characters, so that by the time the readers were getting to the crisis point, they weren't sure who they wanted her to be with because they liked all three of them. And so that was something I did very, very deliberately. And then once I get all that done, this is when I decide how the beginning is going to go. And I'll tell you that I plotted this book in my head. I didn't even write it down because I plotted this book almost 2 years before I started writing it. So I knew in my head all of these things, and I actually knew exactly how the book was going to start. And that was the girl who was playing the game with these men, before Chella showed up, disappears, and Chella takes her place in her bed, and they kind of ambush Quinn, one of the characters in the book, so that he comes up to the apartment thinking it's Rochelle, and it's not, it's Chella. So that was a hook. It was a great hook. And it sets up my beginning. One thing you'll notice is that I don't really have any details in this, and it's because you don't need details when you're plotting. You just need your structure, and you need to fill in the major points, which are all those things that I just explained. And then once you do that, you can pants your ass off all you want. All you need to do is make sure you have that structure. So I'm going to go through just a few ways to start a book, and use my own books as an example. You don't have to have read any of these books to get what I'm saying, because I'm going to explain it to you. But a good beginning is subjective. But one thing they always do is tie the beginning of the book to the ending of the book. And so in Anarchy Missing, the very first line in the book is, "Something is wrong with me." And so I started it with a mystery. What's wrong with me? And by the time we get to the end, the whole ending actually is about what's wrong with him. So I think that brings a sense of satisfaction to the reader. And that's how you get really good reviews. So in the beginning, Quinn is entering the sex club called Turning Point, and he's very excited to go up and have his time with Rochelle because he's basically fallen in love with her, and this is like the highlight of his fucking life at this point. So in taking turns, I started it with intrigue. Someone left and someone appeared, and by the time we get to the end, we find out the reasons why. With Wasted Lust, we start with a threat. Sasha is at the airport and is approached by an FBI agent, and she thinks, holy shit, I'm busted for all the things that I've done in the past. And at the end we find out, no, she's not busted. He's there to help her. In 18, the very first chapter is about Shannon not getting to graduate because she needs credits in math and science. And at the end, of course, she graduates. In 321, it opens with the main character Ark being questioned by the FBI, and something really bad has happened. People are dead, and just something really bad has happened, and they want to know what happened. So they're like, just tell us what happened. And by the end, even though the reader learns everything that happened, it is all this storytelling is taking place in his head, and he ends up telling them nothing, but he reveals everything to the reader. In Mr. Perfect, it starts out with Ellie hating her job because she's got a really high-maintenance client, and at the end, she quits. So she threatens to quit in the first chapter, and at the end, she does quit the job. If you're writing romance, the beginning is where you introduce the two characters, so you introduce the sexual tension. You probably have a sex or romantic scene. You set up the first twist that throws the couple together, and you plant a clue for how they will resolve their issues. You also need to know the rules for romance if you're writing romance. And I apologize for people who are not writing romance, but romance has very specific rules, and that is that you have to have a happily ever after. You have to go from sexual tension to couple. The middle is where your couple grows together and begins to fall in love. The ending is what solves the problem and sells books. And if you want to know, how to write a romance, you should read a lot of romance. You should read the kind of romance that you want to write and learn. Every story needs a structure, so do yourself a favor and get familiar with it. Lots of people I've heard over the years complain about reviews saying it was a quick, easy read. And I think some people take offense to that, but really, what in my book, what quick, easy read translates to is you did everything right. Okay, if somebody tells you it was an easy read, you should say thank you, because you can have the most complicated plot in the world, like I do in my books, and people will still call it an easy read because of the way I set it up. So take it as a compliment. It means you have great flow, and great flow means people keep reading. It's called a page turner, and that's when they start saying, I couldn't stop turning pages. So even though Taking Turns is a very slow book, it's not a thriller at all. If you go look at my reviews, just so many of them just say I couldn't put it down. I stayed up till 3 in the morning, or I woke up early on Saturday to start reading again. And that's why. It's because I put it all together in such a way that it was easy for people to follow. So aim to write it easy read. The reason Goldilocks is so popular is because it's an easy read. It's easy to remember. Children can recite it back after only 1 or 2 tellings. They might not get every detail right, but they understand the structure. And because it's very familiar, it's got 3 bears, 3 bowls, 3 chairs, 3 beds, and 3 bears. That's the beginning and the middle and the end, and it's very easy for them to string it together. It's the ultimate easy read. And the theme of the 3 bears is really what makes it such a great story, because children relate to both Goldilocks and Baby Bear. Children want Goldilocks to be taken care of because she's alone. So they want her to get the porridge, and they want her to be able to rest and not be lost in the woods. But at the same time, because Baby Bear is a child as well, they relate to him, and they feel bad that his porridge is getting eaten and his chair is getting broken, and then they find this stupid girl sleeping in his bed. So the fact that children don't know whose side to be on, and they want to be on both sides, is what creates the drama, tension, and conflict, and makes this story so amazing. Goldilocks is a perfect story, and in fact, the scientific community even uses the Goldilocks word to describe planets when they're looking for planets outside our solar system. A Goldilocks planet is an Earth twin. That means it's not too close to the sun, it's not too far from the sun, it's just right that there will be liquid water on the surface of the planet. So even the geeks in the science world use the they know Goldilocks is the perfect term. So did you see what I just did here? The beginning of this lesson plays a direct role in the end of this lesson, because every story has a structure, even this one. So the take-home point is find a process. This is the process, my process. So you can use this process if you want. You can try it out. You can use your own process. It doesn't really matter. But the key to writing faster, I won't even say writing fast, but the key to writing faster is having a process. And the reason I can write so fast is because my process is second nature. And I do these things in my head, oftentimes a year or more before I start writing the book, and I'm writing other things. I just come up with these things in my head as I'm thinking about it. So find a process for yourself. And I think anyone can learn to write a story. I don't know that everybody could write a good story or a great story, but I think everybody could write a well-structured story that maybe it's not great, but at least at the end the reader is satisfied. And I think you could probably make a pretty good living in this business just by writing those kinds of stories. You might not ever be a bestseller, but sometimes it doesn't matter. And I think all you need is the right teacher. So if my way doesn't work for you, you should go find another way. These are 3 books that I have used extensively in my career. I don't really look at them anymore, but when I was first starting out, the first couple years, I used them a lot. Or if not for every book, at least every 3 or 4 books, I would go back and read it again and make sure I had it down. And The Plot Whisperer by Martha Alderson was really the first thing that made this whole story structure stuff click in my head. And that's how I plotted most of my books. Story Engineering by Larry Brooks is another good one that I really enjoyed. And then The Story Grid by Sean Coyne is the last one that I paid any attention to. And I think it's fabulous. It's got a fabulous breakdown of the plot of The Silence of the Lambs. It's probably one of the best breakdowns I've ever read. So if you want to see how to set up a really fast-paced thriller, and you can do that in romance, by the way, because I do it all the time, I would recommend The Story Grid for that. Can you plot a perfect book? I think yes, because I think I have plotted 5 perfect books. I think there is not one plot hole in any of these 5 books. And the first one I did in 2012 using the Plot Whisperer and Story Engineering as my guides. And that one is in my Jenko series called Fledge. I don't think there's a single plot hole in that whole book. And I think it's set up so amazingly perfect. I don't know that I've ever topped it. It's just the story shook out that way. I also think the Tot book with the character Ford in 2014 was perfectly plotted. It was a much slower book. There's not a lot of action in that one, but it's set up, I set it up very, very well. The Happily Ever After novella in 2015 was just, it was perfect. And then I think Taking Turns is pretty close to perfect. I think there's no plot holes in that because it wasn't a really complicated book at all. It's a lot harder to write book 2 when you're setting up a series mystery like this, like I am. So I don't know if Turning Back will be plotted as equally as well. But Taking Turns was, I think, the perfect plot. And Anarchy Missing surprised me. And I think there's nothing in there that was plotted incorrectly. I think I hit all the points. I think I put them all in at the right time. And I think the ending just superbly ties to the beginning in such a way that people really enjoyed it. Is there a secret system? No. You just need to do the work. You just need to find your process. And that means you have to be able to tell a story. So if this process is something you're interested in learning more about, like I said, they all came from these 3 books: Story Grid, Plot Whisperer, and Story Engineering. If you're got to the end of this video and you're like, yeah, this isn't for me, then don't waste your money, because all of my stuff is built on these 3 books, and they're not going to tell you, anything different than what I was just saying. It's not going to change your mind about structure, because all these books are about structure. So, one more thing is writing schedules. People ask me all the time, do I have a typical writing schedule or a typical day? And I would say, no, there really isn't. I hope to write every day. Some days I have an amazing 8,000 words. Some days I have 0. But I do write at least 20,000 words a week, every single week, without fail, and have done that for more than 5 years. So the key to getting better at writing is to actually write. So you write, you learn more, and you try your hardest. And with each book that you finish, you kind of take stock of it and ask yourself, where did things maybe go wrong? And even if things go wrong, doesn't mean that readers aren't going to like it. Like I only pointed out 5 perfectly plotted books in my mind. Only one of them was a bestseller, and I've sold, hundreds and thousands, millions of copies of other books over the years. So I don't think every story has to be perfect. But if you hit all the high points, I think people, readers will internalize that and realize that your story is better. So that's it for beginnings, and next time we're going to talk about middles. We're going to talk about how to get from the first plot point to the crisis, and how you fill in all that space, because that's 50% of your book is the middle. So that'll be in 2 weeks, and I hope you got something useful from this. If you don't want to check back in 2 weeks and you want me to send you an email to remind you that the blog post is up, just fill out the form below and that will happen. So see you next time, guys. I hope you got something good out of this.